So you need to organise a funeral. And just like every other part of what goes on these days, you're quite right, funerals have changed. It's not quite the same as it was yesterday, since this virus arrived. And so it's possible that you may not be able to have the funeral that you thought you could have right now. Later maybe, but not quite now. We'll explain all this. And it is possible people have been bandering phrases around at you like direct cremation. You've got to have a direct cremation instead. What on earth does that mean? Let's see if we can find out some answers and find out what kind of funeral we can have today. This is a crematorium. This is one in Lincolnshire. And they're operating now under a different set of circumstances that they weren't operating under even just a few days ago. So things are changing. And it's important that we try to outline some of the options that there are in front of you right now. It is possible that you've heard of a phrase direct cremation, and you're half thinking, well, people are saying all kinds of things to me, but I'm just thinking that I'm not going to get the funeral that I thought I could have had for my loved one. It's going to be a different experience. So what are those options? And anyway, what is that phrase direct cremation? What does it actually mean? I don't understand. Well, this is the Lee Fields crematorium, as I said, in Gainsborough, in Lincolnshire, and the manager here is Deborah Bolsden. So let's go and ask her that very question.
A direct cremation really is just meaning no service, so there's no opportunity to actually have a service at that time. The process of the cremation process is identical, done with the same dignity as every other service, but it is there isn't an opportunity for people to gather to say goodbyes. A lot of people do choose not to have a service at all. It's become very popular in recent years after David Bowie made it quite public, really. He did not have a service, he wanted a direct service. The current trend is which is increasing, is over 2% of all funerals take the direct cremation route. And then, of course, we have some people that just want an earlier, more simple service. So trends are changing towards direct funerals now anyway.
So we shouldn't necessarily see this as a negative thing. We can actually see this as a positive option.
That's right. I mean, it's not ideal for everyone, which is why not everyone does it. But being faced with having to have a direct, it's not an unusual thing.
Here, in common with crematoriums all over, you're actually changing the number of seats available.
We've reduced the capacity by half in order to allow more space between people. That's within the guidelines. So it's not nice that we've reduced the capacity, but you can probably see the gaps are increased, meaning that it's going to prevent infection, cross-infection. We're recommending people don't have the hymn books, so we'll just print off sheets so we can dispose of those after the service. We disinfect after every service all the surfaces, push plates, handles.
A lot of this information that's out there at the moment is guidance rather than insisting.
Yes.
But a lot of it seems to be, let's just use some common sense. In other words, if you have elderly mourners, now is probably the time, unfortunately, to say this is probably not the service for you to be at.
That's right. I mean, but that's across the board, not just in this place. It's, leisure centres, pubs, restaurants. No one's been told to close, but it's a sensible thing not to put yourself in that position where there is a possibility of becoming infected.
And I think also we should finally emphasise that all the guidelines that have been issued so far talk about treating families still, regardless of whatever happens, with some dignity and respect.
Definitely, absolutely. I mean, the dignity and respect is paramount to our industry.
So it is perfectly possible that when you arrive at a crematorium like this, you may find things that are not quite as you expected. For example, there may be more hand sanitizers out. It may well be that there are no hymn books. It may well be that the curtains have to be closed. So there might be one or two little things that are different that you were not expecting. But what about those families who now suddenly find themselves in the situation where they actually do not have the money, the resources, the wherewithal, or for whatever reason they just don't feel able to pick up that particular funeral? Well, under Section 46 of the Public Health Control of Disease Act, it places a statutory obligation on local authorities to make funeral arrangements for those who die without anybody willing or able to make the arrangements. So that's important. So if you find yourself in this situation and you really do not have the money that you think you need to make this happen, then your local council has an obligation to make a funeral happen for you. And it also says in these guidelines, although this is a statutory duty, authorities should also be aware that they have a moral duty to treat such cases with the utmost dignity and respect, and to ensure that the funeral service is appropriate, because it's not the days of the pauper funerals. They use the word stigma here. There's no stigma attached to any of this. So if somebody does find themselves in that kind of situation, there is help out there for you. So lots of changes, and we can be pretty sure they won't be the last ones either. A point worth mentioning on that last piece: if you do have a local authority funeral, bear in mind that it's quite likely the local authority will want to get in touch with you at some point to claim their money back from the estate. So just bear that in mind. At some point you may be asked to contribute to that bill. Let's just look at a couple of points in and round all this up. It's a really good idea, I think, to keep in contact with your funeral director and maybe with your crematorium, because that crematorium today may well still be having full funerals, full duration times, just with less seating. Tomorrow it could be all different. They could just be direct cremations, 15 minutes and that's it. You're not there. There is no service, no funeral that you recognise. Your loved one is cremated and that's that. Doesn't all just apply to crems, it also applies to churches. I have heard of large church funerals where the church has turned around and said, no, not happening. 15 people is your lot and that's it. So it's not just crematoriums. London, of course, is a completely different animal at the moment. There'll be all kinds of restrictions there that don't necessarily apply to other parts of the country. So I think it's just a really good idea to check. But when some of the heat has died down a little bit on this, and we can start to be together again, and we can start to go into those places again, you will still be able to have the goodbye that you want and need. So we can get back to that hotel that's always been a favourite of yours. You can get to the beach and the park, and you can get some friends together, and you can have a bottle of wine and just share some jokes and share some smiles and play some music that they liked, and just remember. You can have a big occasion if you like, of course, and go to those rooms in that hotel and have a big razzmatazz, and or go back to that crematorium again if that's what you need. It's all about what you need, really. So it can happen, just not today. But do bear that point in mind, that at some point you will be able to have that goodbye that you want and you need, because you hear Deborah say, this is all about treating people with dignity and respect.